So welcome to Leaning Into Therapy. It is a podcast where I interview therapists and they talk about whatever they're really into. So today and I'm Keisha Holmes, KDH Counseling. Some people call me Katie, but it's Keisha. And this is Monet David.
Yes.
And what are you going to talk about, Monet, today? What are you excited about?
I'm excited about my upcoming CEU, which has to do with my certification in sex education. And so I want to talk about that today.
So can you tell us a little bit about what is a sex educator?
Yeah, so a sex educator, there's a big accrediting body that we kind of answer to. So it's the American Association for Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. So we call it ASECT. And they kind of work the same way that like a social worker would answer to a board, or like how we as LPCs answer to a board. They set out guidelines and criteria with which somebody can become a sex educator. And so a sex educator has a lot of breadth and depth under that title. So basically, it's very much like the title says, I can educate people about sex, but what I choose to focus on is my own niche if I want it to be.
So, and why that instead of a sex therapist? What's the difference?
My experience, I was so burnt out from the process of becoming a licensed professional counselor. I didn't want to have to repeat the same steps again as far as for like supervision and a licensure process. I grew up wanting to become an educator in some capacity, and then I kind of panicked when I got to college and was like, no, I can't do this. But I keep coming back to that idea of education. I think knowledge is really powerful. It's very liberating. And so when you combine that with educating people about sex, has so many implications to it. So that felt better than sex therapist.
Well, and what is I want to say the breadth or the extent of being a sex educator? Because, when you think of sex therapy, most people think couples or
right.
Partners of some sort, and the issues that arise. But I think sex educator is a lot broader. It covers all things related.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I'm thinking about the people that I've come to interact with in my process. So like, even as a sex educator, I didn't get out of supervision. I've had to do 16 hours of group supervision with other people who are pursuing the same certification. Some people take what they're already passionate about and marry it to the idea of sex education. So I'm thinking there's a person that I met that loves ecology and being out in nature. And so they combined that passion with their passion for sex education. And so they talk about like how to be one with nature and your sexuality. There's another person that as a parent, they really wanted to empower their children. So they created a podcast where they teach other parents how to talk to their kids about sex. So like that was their sex education journey. And I just really liked the idea of, I don't like working with more than one person in a counseling session. I've come to learn that about myself in the years that I've been practicing. I really feel like I do my best one-on-one. And I felt like if I could educate people about the myths that kind of trap people into like shame and guilt about their sexuality, if I could combine that with the counseling that I was already doing, I could really like make a difference in my clients' lives.
So what is the shame that you have observed in others?
The way it comes up in a lot of sessions is people have like preferences and kinks and stuff. And the kink is just like, I'm not going to define it well enough, but it's basically like a preference for what turns you on and what you like in a sexual setting. Mm-hmm. And they're really common. And sometimes also what comes up is like people have a lot of shame about their fantasies. And so I get to tell them like a fantasy is just a fantasy. It doesn't mean that you actually necessarily want to do it. Sometimes what happens is we think we want to do it, we do it, and we're like, that wasn't what I thought it would be, right? And so it's just the idea that is what people like. And I'm like, it's okay to like things. You're not harming anybody. You're not harming yourself. Although that is something too, but yeah.
Well, and because that could be.
Right.
I guess I'm wondering too, because that's more with like adult clients, right? You will come into those topics and exploration with adults. Yeah. But I'm thinking about shame for kids and teens.
Oh yeah. So that, I feel like that's where I kind of found my sex education niche. So combining the words sex and children like blasphemy, right? Like we're not supposed to combine those two things. It's really bad. And but to be human is to be sexual, right? So that's a kind of a radical concept, like from the moment of birth. Um, my sex education with kids and with adolescents, with teens, is teaching them about their body and really empowering them about autonomy and like who's allowed to touch them, teaching them that it's their body, teaching them the words for their body parts, teaching them that like how they feel is okay. Some of my teens are gay or bisexual, and they've been hit with a lot of like messaging that that's not okay, that there's something inherently wrong with them. And so being able to hold space for them for the 60 minutes that I do get them in a week's time is really powerful. And that's kind of the realm of sex education with that age group. We're not teaching them about sex. We're not teaching them about anything dirty. It's about body autonomy. It's about consent. It's about empowerment.
Can you explain consent? Because I think that's the thing that I get most excited about when you talk about it. And I guess for my own work with teens, I would cover consent a lot. I called it something else, but I would cover it a lot. So how do you define consent?
Yeah, so I think I always love to tell my teens, like everybody's lying. Everybody's lying about what they're doing. Not everybody's having sex. I mean, some people are, but like don't feel compelled that you have to do things that you don't want to do. And so I describe consent as something freely given and can be revoked at any point. And that can go as far as like if you want to hold hands on a Monday with your partner and then by Tuesday you're not feeling hand holding, you get to say, no, I feel like holding your hand. Once you open the door for something doesn't mean that you can't close it. You can absolutely close it the minute you walk through the door or like a week after you've walked through it, if that makes sense. So just getting them to understand that their body is their own, that they don't ever have to do anything they don't want to do. They don't, even if they feel pressured, that they don't have to. And even if they thought that they might like it and they end up not liking it, they can stop it at any point.
I love that.
There's an acronym. Yeah, there's an acronym called FRIES, and I never remember all the words. There's like freely given, it can be revoked, it can be like, I think it's independent. Yeah, I'm screwing it up entirely, but I love to scream out FRIES whenever I'm like, no, I don't like this. I want it to be freely given consent. I want it to be an enthusiastic consent, not an absence of no, which is a big deal.
Well, and what's the difference of freely given consent versus an absence of no? I think this is so good. The absence of no is...
The absence of no isn't consent.
Exactly.
That's why I like an enthusiastic consent of like, yes, I want to do this. Yes, keep going. Yes, this feels good. And I think it just helps both people engage in the interaction, feel good about what's happening, right? And then there's no after the fact, like, oh, I really didn't want to do that, or like any kind of other misinterpretation of events.
And I know with some of my clients in the past, they would overthink it. So if there wasn't a verbal, active confirmation of consent, they were like, oh no, I read something. Did I force my person to do something just because they didn't actively? And so I think it's almost like a reassure, but I think that it's a really good rule because then people are using their words. They're able to say what they want or don't want. I mean, there's so many things that are good about life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's another thing that comes up a lot. And a lot of my clients will talk about maybe unfortunate sexual experiences where communication in and of itself is difficult enough, right? And then you add sex to it. And then that makes it even more difficult. So they'll talk about like, I thought my partner wanted me to do those things. And then after we were said and done, they didn't. And I feel terrible. What does that make me? So kind of like unpacking all of that. And even outside of like a sexual context, I'm a big proponent of like, what did you learn from this? And how can you take this information that you've learned and do better next time? Because I think some people get really stuck and they just were like, well, I'm never going to have sex again. I'm like, well, that's cool. Some people can do that, but I want you to have a fulfilling life. And part of being a fulfilled human being is the sexual component of your life. So like, it doesn't mean that you can't have sex ever again. It just means you have to change about how you approach it and you have to be more intentional about it.
Well, and I think that reaffirms how complicated it is for teens and adults navigating this world with everything that's on the internet, everything they're learning, their own development. I mean, oh, this is so good to have a safe place to explore it. So, which brings up this other point. So often in my office, people will have shame about something that happened when they were a child, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
these are willingly like engaged in sexual activities that they feel like, oh my gosh, why did I allow that? But they were a kid, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And that's part of my motivation for doing this continuing education class, because that is also another scenario that comes up a lot in session is I'll get to know an adult client pretty well. And then they'll be like, you mentioned that you like are a sex educator. Like, can I talk about something that happened to me as a kid? I've been carrying it with me my entire life. I feel so much shame about it. I just need like clarity on it. And it's so, I mean, I can literally see the stress come off of them when we talk about like context, because that's a big key phrase in this continuing education class. Context around behaviors in children is so important, right? It's not all actions are created equal, not all motivations for those actions are equal. So being able to explain that a lot of what these people have gone through are very normal childhood behaviors just like liberates them from that shame entirely. And they're like, oh, okay, and that's wonderful.
What is the course on?
It is on, so the title of it is Childhood Sexual Behaviors, When Is It a Concern? Which I feel like is straightforward, right? So like, when do we panic? When do we worry? And so the intended audience is for other therapists and helping professionals. And I was working with families who would come to me and say, oh, my 5-year-old did this. Was he molested or was she molested? And at that point in my career, I didn't have this training under my belt. I didn't have this education under my belt. And so I was like, I don't know. We don't talk about it in grad school, like we don't really bring it up at all, especially with children. So I'm like, your guess is as good as mine, parent. I have no idea what this means. And it seems like in the profession, we just defer, report to DCFS, just report to DCFS, let them handle it, but it's not really attending to the bigger issue there, which is like, there probably isn't communication happening between parent and child. There probably isn't communication or modeling of behavior between parent and child of like what's appropriate, what's not appropriate when it comes to like privacy and bodily autonomy and like how do we interact with our other friends? Because like a 5-year-old is still kind of figuring out the world at that point, right? So they don't know that playing doctor isn't maybe the most appropriate thing to do with their friend. And so I wanted this class to teach therapists how to respond appropriately and to start a dialogue with family members of like how to protect your kids and stuff.
I like that you're naming it.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to educate the people that will be providing the services, right? So therapists, you're being direct. And you're talking about the normality. So there's a lot of normal behavior that, because of our own shame about sexuality and all things sexual, right? Mm-hmm. We all like want to be hush hush and not say it. I mean, even people don't like using the right names for it.
Oh yeah.
Like somehow that is like crazy to have a child actually name it. But me and you talked about this once, like having words for something, it normalizes it. It allows for people to be able to talk about it and not feel ashamed. I mean, and you're trying to educate the educators who will then give it to the parents, which I don't know. I think it's good stuff. I do.
So too. I think it's beneficial. I think it's empowering. I think, as we were talking, I'm like, you don't parent in a vacuum. Like you bring your own stuff with you when you parent. And so if you've got a history of like, maybe a sexual thing happening as a child and you don't know any better and you haven't processed it, not for lack of trying, but maybe lack of resources or whatever, you could be projecting some stuff onto your kids. Like your kid's doing a really innocent thing, but what you're bringing to the table is like, oh my gosh, what's this? What's happening here? And being able to have a helping professional provide context again, and to ease some of that shame and guilt, I think can be a really profound thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, then we're in the boat with them. If we can't ease the shame and guilt, then we're just like, I don't know, let's call and see. And, and we're supposed to be the ones that know. I know we can't know everything, but
it's true.
Good information, good information. And I know even us talking about it right now, I can feel my own aversion to it. It's so interesting.
It feels weird. And I think like just
Yeah.
in the culture that we find ourselves, it's treated exceptionally taboo, to the detriment of kids. Because if a kid doesn't know any better, how are they supposed to do better? And what I mean by that is like, if they don't know the proper terminology for their private parts, and then, or they don't know that only certain adults are allowed to touch their private parts, and then somebody that's not supposed to be is doing that, they don't have the language to tell you, right? And so they're just kind of stewing in shame and guilt, and um, there's no way to correct it or protect them. So if anything, it's like I want them to be okay. I want them to be a kid as long as they possibly can, is my hope with all of this.
Well, and I think often like children will feel ashamed of an interaction, even though it's not their fault, right? But they feel complicit in it. And so by empowering parents, then they can help break that, like.
Well, and I feel like we keep using examples of like if a kid was preyed upon, right? But I'm talking even like okay, I mentioned earlier, like kids playing doctors with one another. Kids, show me yours, I'll show you mine, kind of thing. Very age appropriate, especially when they start to realize that kids of the opposite gender have different genitals than them. Very normal. They're curious. They just want to know. When kids touch themselves, parents project of like, oh, what are they doing? Kids are sensory. They're kinesthetic. They learn by touching, right? So of course, it's like they have this development. Some kids like realize, okay, I have a penis. They forget for a few years, and then they remember. And when they're toddlers, right? And so they want to touch it. They're just fascinated by it. It doesn't mean that they've been touched inappropriately. It doesn't mean that they're doing something that an adult would be doing in the same way. It's just like, it's a novel thing for them. So to be able to tell a parent, like, don't worry, that's appropriate,
Well, and I think it's interesting that in our culture, we got so, which is good, right? We got so overly aware of people being sexually abused. There was this whole movement, right?
Yeah.
And like how common it is. But so we went to everything being that. I mean, people are always afraid. Was I abused and just didn't know? People talk about it in my office all the time.
Yeah.
But side of the normal, it's just normal development.
Well, and like all of that came, it's so tangentially related, but all of that fear came from the satanic panic in the 80s, right? So a little bit before our time, but like there was this, belief.
Not mine.
Okay, well, see, I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. I didn't know if you remembered it or not. I don't know what part of the 80s. I know it was the 80s, right? So they had the satanic panic, which was daycare workers, like children started coming out saying that they were being abused by daycare workers and like they're being sexually, all in the name of like these Satanists and stuff. Complete bunk. It was not real. They were able to figure out years later, it actually changed the way that health professionals interact with children who do disclose being sexually abused. There's a whole protocol now. Because what happened is these kids would say things, they would get a desired reaction from the adult that was in charge, and the adult in charge would reinforce it. So the kid would say, I was touched inappropriately. They would say, oh my goodness, thank you so much for telling us. Let's go get some ice cream together, right? So like, it's behavioral stuff. So all that to say, you're absolutely right. Like we went from like children being touched to like not being an issue at all to like this big incident happening, and then we went to the extreme, and then we're like, we have to protect children at all costs, to the point that we are going to minimize their own inherent sexuality as children. And again, I'm not saying that children need to be, they're not having sex, it's not about that. Your sexuality is more than just a sexual act. It's part of your identity, it's part of your expression, it is part of your body, it is your genitals, but it's so much more than that. So yeah, we have kind of like gone to the other end of it and kept them really ignorant when they need to be informed.
I'm hoping we're finding balance right now. I mean, that's of all things. And look, when that happened in the 80s, another part of that, I remember playing in the neighborhood, like we would roam free on our bikes, do whatever we wanted. Cause I'm 45, going to be 46. But I remember whenever my mom was like, oh, vans are kidnappers. Yeah. There was like, during the same time, right? There was danger in the world. Everybody became so crazy about it. And now, I mean, probably I don't know.
I'm so glad you brought up that point, because guess what? More kids are molested by people they know and that family members know than a stranger in a bush. It is rarely ever a stranger in a bush in a van. It is people that are trusted by the family. It's often family members themselves. It is people in power or related to the family. That's why it's so important to teach your kids, like, yes, you know, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, and she is a friend, but she is not supposed to touch you there. Like, that's why we teach that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The
So,
safety around it.
yeah.
I love it. That's a really good point. I think often, and at least when I hear, because I work with trauma, it's often family members.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a sad, because the family is not always, but most times the family is not supportive of the victim, which is a
It's
whole nother issue.
usually cyclical. It's generational. That family member is perpetuating what was done to them. And so it like breeds this cycle of like, we're not talking about it. We're not going to address it. It's easier to invalidate the child and just kind of deal with it. And I mean, I'm not going to minimize how hard that is to confront the fact that like maybe it's your mother or your grandfather who's doing this stuff. So it's kind of helpful to keep the child ignorant and just kind of make it seem like it's normal. And what always gets me is we are talking more about human trafficking than ever before. We have a governor who's very pro, like, let's put in barriers to stop this from happening. But what we don't talk about, because it's always like the stranger in Target that's following you and your child around. In Louisiana, more often than not, it's cases of family trafficking family, because we live in such a poor state. It's often how rent gets paid or gets food on the table. So like, again, if a child was educated and could speak to the fact that like, I have to do this activity every month, like, then we could get help. So, I mean, there's just all these really justifiable reasons to want to talk about sex and talk about sex in the context of childhood and adolescence. Yeah.
Well, and I think the point, why are you doing this class? What's your greater motivation for this?
I wish no kid had to deal with that. You know what I mean? I wish kids knew that, their body was their own and that they could have consent or boundaries, and parents could be liberated from that shame that they maybe experienced as a child and could protect their child, right? Like, so much of this emphasis is like, I want to protect my child, I have to keep my child safe. Part of that is having uncomfortable conversations. But if me as a helping professional can help you with that, I'm so happy to do it. And it does come through that way a lot. Like, I do have my teen parents who are like, you need to talk to my child about having sex. I'm very worried. And I'm like, I can start that conversation, but you have to keep it up because you see them way more than I do. And they're not going to come to me, like after something may have happened, they're going to come to you. So I'm so happy to share that resource with them.
So you really want to empower family systems. You want to empower the individual, the kids themselves, the adults, the family systems.
Yes.
And therapists at the same time.
Everybody. It takes a village, right? So let's empower the village to empower each other, and then
support. I like how you said it though, that it's that they can own their body. How did you say that?
Oh God, don't even ask me. God, yeah, so I want them to have ownership over their body, right? I could have afforded that. Like, as a kid, it would have been really nice because now there's this big movement. I love it. I don't know why I'm whispering, like I'm telling you a secret, but like empowering kids, if they don't want to hug, like, I'm not a hugger. I hate hugging. And it would have been so nice for an adult to tell me, like, you don't have to hug anybody you don't want to hug, right? But out of politeness and Southern charm, we always like, go hug your relative, go hug them, go hug the family friend. And it's usually innocuous. I'm not saying like everybody's out as a predator, but like, I just don't like it. I would have been so empowered to be like, well, no, I don't like to hug. Like, give me a fist bump, give me a handshake kind of thing. And I love that. I think that's great because it teaches kids
to say no. But think of what that little example teaches them. Like, an adult can want you to hug them and you can say, I don't want to hug you. And it's not mean. You're not being disobedient or rude. You're just saying what you like or don't like. I mean, that is a very subtle example or big example, I don't know, of a greater issue, because I think older generations would have been like, that's disrespectful.
It's rude. Yeah. Rude. Respect your elders. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, there's something to be said about change in a positive way. And to the naysayers who maybe still believe that, like I've seen stuff online where like a parent had maybe gone too far with teaching consent to their child to the point where the child didn't want their diaper changed by the parent anymore. And I'm like, no, this is nuanced, as is everything. Right. So we teach the child, like, there are certain things that you can't you can't like not consent to. If you have a dirty diaper, baby, like I have to change you because it could cause an infection if it stays, like if you have poop on you for too long, or if you have pee on
Yeah,
you for too long,
a
right?
little
Like, so you provide an age appropriate explanation for like why you can't deny this. A doctor has to look at you, but I'm going to be in the room with you. So I'll make sure that nothing happens to you. Or like, I don't know, any other context where a kid would need to be seen naked, but that whole thing, right? So like, it's not a free for all. I feel like people get really like freaked out and like, oh, you're just going to do whatever they want. No, they're kids. You pull parent rank and you make sure that you teach them.
Yes, within reason. Like some people get super black and white about this stuff. So it's like all one way or the other. Well, and it's not. Sometimes we do have to have a little, I think ear health stuff. Yeah. Is
Yeah,
a
a kid,
example.
sometimes I do feel generous and I do want to hug somebody, right? But like to just kind of have that choice, right? So like it's the choice and not the expectation. That is really great.
I love that. I do. I might write a blog on that because I really like that title, like owning your own body.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Because if you can't, I mean, I can see all the issues that could come about it. And if you can, then it's easier to say no. It's easier to consent. I mean, because if you can't say no, you really can't consent. In reality, you need.
If that choice is taken from you, then you really don't have consent.
No.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to add about the class?
I'm really proud of the class. I've been considering it and calling it my baby. It's something I'm really passionate about. And when I'm passionate about something, I get really infectious about it. And like I want to share and just go on and on about it. I will say something that we didn't necessarily speak to in here that I do get to in the presentation is the multicultural considerations for this kind of stuff. And what I mean by that is just, I go into the idea of adultification, and that's when we project adult expectations on children. And I partner that with children of color often don't get the same benefits of the doubt as white children do. So we can have a white child and let's say a black child enact the same behaviors, and there's some kind of sexual component, right? And we will kind of let the white child like, oh, okay, well, what's going on there? And then we may not get the same benefit of the doubt to the black child. There may be this projection of, oh, well, she's acting like a grown girl, a grown woman, or a grown man. And I think that is so important to consider as a helping professional. What kind of biases are present in this child's life that's not giving them the benefit of the doubt? How can we give them grace? How can we empower them? And again, there's that piece of like, how do we work with parents as well? Because sometimes parents have internalized stuff going on, and we want to give them a space to be able to express that and to highlight that your child is still a child. That even though society may view them as a young adult unfairly, you at home get to view them as they are as a child. And this is how we're going to treat the behavior that we're working with.
Well, and it makes me think of 14-year-olds or 13-year-olds. Sometimes they look old.
They do.
You know?
Yeah.
They look really old, but they are still, they're young.
Well, menstruation is happening at an earlier rate than ever before in girls. And so they're developing breasts much younger. They are menstruating much younger. And there's this idea of like, oh, well, they're a woman now. And their brain isn't going to be done developing till they're 25. So like they have a woman's body with a child's brain. And so it's our duty as the adults in their lives to protect them. And part of that is educating them and still seeing them as a child, not a woman, not a man.
Well, and you're really breaking down like the nuances are like, if anything is reported or talked about in session, I mean, even with a parent to a child, like really trying to break apart what was talked about, what was happening. I mean, you can't assume anything. And we're seeing it through our own biases, parents, therapists, all of us. And the kids are reporting things to us, and we're trying to be objective but you really need to be as objective as possible to get to the bottom of it.
You need to be curious.
Yes,
that's the biggest thing. It's like, just be curious. Don't assume, ask a lot of questions. And we do talk about scope of practice. So like what as LPCs, which is the predominant audience, licensed professional counselors, what have we been trained? What is within our scope to do and how to address this? Because there's a whole job of forensic interviewing where they do interview people who have been victims of sexual abuse or sexual assault, right? And so like their training is very much their own domain, and we don't want to interfere with that. we want to, get them connected to those kinds of services if it's necessary. And we just kind of want to support the family in therapy. And I go into detail about how to do that too, just like starting dialogues and safety planning and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
It's a whole range of like normal behaviors, normal sexual, look, I didn't even want to say it, normal sexual behaviors,
concerning behaviors, and then abnormal behaviors, right? And like, I hate using those terms. I like them in the science context because like what's normal, like what the biggest thing they teach us when you start this program that I'm in is like normal's relative. But there is something to be said about what is appropriate development in a child. What is like, okay, the child should know this information. How do they know it? And then even then sometimes they just like, we don't realize how perceptive they are. And we think we're being really like slick and like not leading them on. And it's not even like malicious. It's just like we had a TV show on, we had Showtime on, and there was a sex scene and the kids saw it, right? Like we're not just intentionally showing them pornography or anything, but like even then it's like there's cause for correction there. Like, okay, we can't have Showtime on while they're awake. Like this is something for after they go to bed. And it's a simple correction, right? Like that's an easy fix. And it doesn't always have to be like nefarious in nature or anything like that. So
what do you mean by nefarious? I like that. Yeah. What do you mean by nefarious?
I think people think like, oh, if a child knows something about sex or sexuality, it's because like they were exposed to it. Like somebody's showing them pornography or somebody's having sex in front of them or talking to them about it. But like the world's inherently sexual and it's a commodity. And so like it's sex sells. And so it's going to be sold to us like in really like innocuous, like commercial ways. And so like not everything has like an evil, I don't know, foundation to it. It's just kind of like part of living in the 21st century in 2022.
Well, think of musicians too. I mean, the way they dress, the way they dance, kids will be mimicking stuff.
Yes.
That we can't even
tell you like what kind of songs I was singing in middle school and not even realizing like I knew the words, I knew what it meant, but I didn't really know what it meant, right? And so like that's also another thing. It's like your kid may say so like really sexual things and they don't have a clue. They don't know what they're saying. Like they kind of have an idea. And so like coming to them and being like, hey bud, like, you can't, you're 13, right? Like, come on. But often parents just kind of freak out, which doesn't really help. It's a teaching moment, right? Like when a child says something like that, it's a teaching moment to be like, hey, where did you hear that? And like, what do you know about that? And like,
what does it mean to you? I mean, the curiosity thing is so valid. There's been so many times in my office where I think I would hear something and I'd be like, oh no. And then I'm like, okay, so what does that mean to you? And they have, honestly, a lot of times they wouldn't know what they were saying. So they would tell me the definition. I'm like, that's not what it means. And we're all freaking out thinking it's something else, right? And kids are just being kids. Exactly. They mimic us and they say things, but I think that curious component is really like your best friend, right? To try to get to the bottom of it.
And it's like, I'm not saying for parents not to panic or anything, but just don't try not to panic in front of your kid. Like you can have a reaction and you just do your best. And
you call a therapist. Yeah.
Right. You consult with a therapist or you come see me because I do love helping parents kind of make sense of that and unburdening some of that responsibility off of them. There's something else that I wanted to bring up and I can't remember what it was. I don't even know. But yeah, I feel like we've hit all the major points that I wanted to hit.
Well, any last closing statements?
I mean, yeah, like I said, to be human is to be sexual. So it's not dirty. It's definitely a part of who we are. And if you're wanting to unpack some of that, then therapy can be helpful. I have a lot of parents who are like coming into parenthood and just like, I want to do things differently than my parents did, or like I had a negative experience and I don't want that for my child. And so that's something else that I really like help facilitating. Yeah, I don't have any issues talking about sex.
I know. I love this. So when is your class?
My class is on Friday, October 14th from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. It is, again, geared towards licensed professional counselors. And what I mean by that is like, they're going to get credits for continuing education hours. But if I think it's appropriate for school counselors, for pediatricians, anybody that works with a child could be helped. It'll be 3 CEUs and it'll be on Zoom. So you can do it from the comfort of your own home. We ask that you keep your camera on, but, and I'm trying to get group participation to happen. So that's not just me lecturing for the 3 hours, but actually like taking away something from it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Monet.
Thank
and we'll do
you.
more on this topic because this is just one of many.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.